This is Tim Beckley, and I'm in sunny and very hot Tucson, Arizona. And we have a very special guest this evening. It's Camille Harmon. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we're in her home, the home of her husband, Jeffrey. And I met her for the first time a few nights ago. She lectured at the World UFO Group meeting that Alan Benz holds annually here in Tucson, and told a remarkable experience that I had never heard before. And I was so impressed because normally abduction experiences to me are kind of like shaky and borderline. I've heard so many of them, and I tend to believe that there are a few that may be legitimate, but I think there's probably a lot more at play than just people, having experiences with extraterrestrials. My own opinion, of course, is that these beings, some of which are shapeshifters and tricksters, are probably not from other planets. They are probably part of some paranormal environment or other dimension or realm or something that we have not conceived of. I understand that. Tell us a little bit about your background before you tell us how you really got into the UFO and abduction phenomena.
I had a normal. Well, I didn't have a. No one's normal. I had a non-alien oriented background. Growing up in Louisiana, mm-hmm. I was adopted by my aunt and raised with her and her kids at a young age. I have a rocket scientist in the family, my uncle on my mom's side, mm-hmm. who was career NASA. And I grew up in Lafayette, Louisiana, predominantly Cajun country. I went to college there. I ended up acting. I moved to Virginia for a few years. And then I decided to get a master's in theater, and I went back and I got a degree in New Orleans, at University of New Orleans, under my old name, Camille Mo, which is a French name, my adopted name. Then I moved to Los Angeles in 1995 with my boyfriend, who was also an actor, and that's when all this happened.
Okay, now had you had an interest in the paranormal or in UFOs, or anything happened to you while you were growing up in Louisiana?
I would say that I always had an interest in the paranormal. I hadn't had anything happen to me, though, that I was aware of.
No ghostly phenomena?
No, as a matter of fact, I hooked up with a group that was kind of metaphysical, and we all went to a haunted house and spent the night. It was like a hotel called the Myrtles Plantation, and very notorious for ghosts. And I was so wanting to see a ghost.
Haunted painting?
It might have a haunted painting.
Well,
It has a lot of stuff. There are all kinds of
it seems
stories
to me that I went somewhere one time. Where is it located?
It's in St. Francisville, Louisiana. It's an old plantation.
Oh, then it's not the same one. But there are a lot of haunted plantations.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially down in the south here.
I know. And so we spent the night there, and I was so like, I'm going to see a ghost. I was so excited, and I didn't see anything. And some of my friends actually that stayed awake longer did see things, and I was so jealous. So I always had an interest, but nothing had ever happened.
So how old were you when you moved to sunny California?
I was probably, it was 1995, so I was 29.
And did you go out there to be an actress or work in film in the production sense? Or?
I had my master's, and I had done a lot of acting in New Orleans and Virginia, and so I had a good resume. I was SAG, I had an agent, I had done a lot of stuff already. So that was just the next step for me and for this guy I was with. And so we just took off, and that was my intention. I had no intention of getting involved with anything, that was going to totally take over my life and, cause him to break up with me, and that was not the plan.
Mm-hmm.
So when that all happened, it was
how did the plan go awry?
Well, we moved. Well, okay, first of all, I have to back up. In August of 1995, when I knew we were moving to LA, and I was still living in New Orleans, we moved to LA a month later, I read my first book about UFOs. And it was just happenstance. I was walking through a bookstore, and I saw Whitley Strieber's, what is the one, the blue and silver one? Breakthrough. Yeah. And I just thought, wow, this guy's still writing about aliens, and I kind of knew about him. And so I decided to buy the book and read it, and I was mesmerized. I thought, wow, this is some serious stuff going on. And I believed him. And I just thought, wow, what an eye-opener, So that was my first book I ever read about it. And then a month later, I moved to LA. And within months of moving to LA was when all this stuff happened to me. So it was very quick upon the heels of reading that book. And sometimes I actually wonder if reading that book either attracted these beings to me or just set my mind up to be able to like catch them and clue
Well,
in.
if they
I don't
had
know.
done that, there must be something special about you then, because let's say that book sold 40 or 50,000 copies. If half the people were in contact with live on a man-made planet.
That's a
Well,
good point. So,
yeah.
yeah, it probably triggered something in me to where my mind was open to that. And then, well, as my husband would explain it later when I met him, I was, at this time in the end of 1995, I was going through an astrological transit. I was having some astrological stuff that to
Your
him...
husband, Jeffrey, is an
Yeah, he's a
astrologer.
professional astrologer. And he said, oh, well, no wonder this happened to you then, because you had this, this, and this going on, which to him as an astrologer indicated paranormal happenings, secrets being revealed, very emotional, very karmic kind of upheaval. And so I thought, oh, great. Well, maybe that's why I clued in. Because now I look back on my childhood, and I do think that it was happening earlier in my life. And I'm just guessing. But I have a lot of the hallmarks from childhood of alien abduction as well. I had this severe nosebleeds as a child where I had to have my nose cauterized. I would wake up with blood all over the pillow from my nose. I had allergies. I had fear of paranormal things as a child. I was afraid...
Have you ever fooled around with the Ouija board or anything like that?
Well, I think I did once when I was about 13. But even before that, I remember I had a closet and there was like a styrofoam wig stand, like a head kind of thing in my closet on the shelf. And if the closet door was open and I could see that wig stand, it would totally freak me out, this big white head in my closet. So that, I was afraid of anything reptilian as a child, like lizards, snakes. I was afraid of the slee stacks on the TV show The Land of the Lost. I was afraid of the creature from the Black Lagoon. I had a fear of vampires. So I had a lot of, I wasn't afraid of people or, I wasn't afraid of like logical things like getting robbed or, I was afraid of paranormal things all my life as a child. And I went to Catholic school and I refused to be confirmed. I remember they came and got me and said, you never got confirmed. How did we miss that? And I said, I don't want to be confirmed. And they said, oh, okay. And they left me alone. So I always knew there was more going on than, what most people were.
Okay, so you're in LA.
Yeah, so I'm in LA.
You're looking around for work? You've got work?
Yeah, I had work. I had a house. I had a job. I had an agent. Everything was going great. So I didn't have any stress. Everything was great.
William Morris was wise.
And so I, everything was going great for me, and I shouldn't have had any stress, is what I'm getting at. But what happened is my body started having all these stressful reactions. And I had crying jaws, and sore breasts, and nausea, and I had no menstrual cycle. From the time I moved to LA until Christmas of that, after Christmas of that year, it just disappeared. And I was on the pill, and I thought, well, that's kind of weird. Maybe it's just, moving, stressful, I don't know. And, but what really was the clincher for me was in December of that year. I'd only been in LA since late August or September. I had this attack of sleep paralysis in the night. And I'd had that all my life occasionally, but this time it happened. Eric was in the other room watching TV. It happened twice in one night. It happened while he was watching TV, and then it happened in the bed when he was in the bed with me later that night. And I woke up paralyzed. I couldn't move. And I saw this, as I came awake, I saw this image of me pointing a gun in my mouth. And I was like, what the hell? Because that was such a non sequitur in my life. I mean, I had no suicidal tendencies. I don't even like guns. It was like, where is that coming from? And it wasn't part of a dream. It wasn't like a logical thing that it was just an image. And I heard this little voice say my name while I was frozen in my bed. And it just had this very mechanical sound, and it just said, Camille. And I was totally freaked out. Because even though I'd woken up frozen before, I had never heard a voice, and I'd never seen an image like that. So the combination was very unsettling.
Okay, what did the image look like?
It was just...
Did it look like the figure on the front communion?
Oh no, I didn't see a being. No, I saw a picture. I saw an image of myself with a gun in my mouth, and I'm trying to figure that out still now. Like, what was that? And I don't know if it was an image placed there to threaten me, or if it was just some mind-bending thing that somebody was putting in my brain to stimulate a reaction. I don't know what it was. It's still a big mystery, and I've never read anything like that.
Well, actually, I have. Well, even Bud Hopkins talks about in his some of his earlier books, like screen images and different things that people have seen.
Well, I've heard of screen images like people will see an owl or a deer,
Yeah.
but never like a violent, self-inflicting.
I can't. There have been things.
That
there
rings
have
a
been.
bell?
Yeah, there
Okay.
have. Yeah. Of course, there's so much literature on the abduction aspect of the UFO mystery that it's a mystery. I mean,
Right.
basically, everybody kind of has maybe hints of what's going on, but I don't think myself that anyone has like the answers, because what happens to you during these experiences, I don't. Well, first of all, how can they be validated? I mean,
Yeah.
is it, okay. So continue. I don't want to. It's your story.
So the
and,
next part that was like the beginning, really. So then what happened was in December, Eric and I were walking the dog in the daytime, and we had a sighting. It was my first sighting. I was so
In the
excited.
daytime?
In the daytime. In December on a Sunday. I think it was December 18th. I'm not sure. I wrote it down somewhere. And it was a black thing way, way high in the sky that wasn't moving.
Mhm.
And we had trees for reference, and we looked at it for a long time going, what the heck is that? It's not moving. And it was LA.
Could it have been a kite or?
It was too high,
Mhm.
and it was really high. And I couldn't even make out the shape. I can't tell you if it was a circle or a triangle, but it was very black, and it had like a plasma edge around it, like that made it undefined.
It was black,
It was black. And he was joking with me. And
not reflecting the sun or
no,
anything.
no. And he made eye contact with me and kind of joked and said, well, what if it's a UFO? Because he knew I had been reading about them now. And I said, well, what if it is? And we looked back up, and it was gone. And then I got really excited, because we looked everywhere. We were standing kind of on a hill, and we're like, okay, where did it go? And so I said, you keep the dog, and I'm going to run home and report it. And I went home, and I looked in the phone book, and they actually had a MUFON hotline, then a phone number in the phone book. And so I called them, and I said, they were just on a sighting, and I left a message. Someone called me back, and when he called me back and took my report, he said, we have these meetings every month. Would you like to come? I said, oh yes, that's right up my alley. So I started going to the meetings. So that would have been January or
Did they
February.
ever say if there were any other sightings that day?
No. So I went to the meetings, and then the first meeting that really triggered me to think that I was being abducted was seeing Kim Carlsberg.
Mhm.
And her story involved so many elements that are classic, the hybrid breeding and the military abductions and all these things. And I was just a mess at the end of that talk. I mean, I was shaking in the back row. And I went by myself. And I just knew, I just knew. I was like, I am one of these people. That's what's going on. And she had a book in the back, and I went and flipped through it, and she had kind of a checklist in there. And I was going down the checklist. I was like, oh, great, I have like 90% of the things on this checklist.
Mhm.
And I made it known. I just kind of walked around and went, oh my God, I think I'm one of these people. I think I might have talked to Kim. Somebody introduced me to Barbara Lamb that night. And then we set up a regression, and we targeted that night in December when I had the voice in that whole night. And we got aliens, and that was my first regression. And it was a humdinger. I mean, it was, very traumatic. I was in the bed. I had the blue light came through the ceiling, this very turquoisey blue. And when it struck me, I was paralyzed, and I curled into a little ball, kind of, and I went through the ceiling. And then when I was flat again, I was in a white, misty room, and I didn't even want to look around. And so I never saw a craft. I just went from being in my bedroom and slightly above the house to being in this misty white room. So I don't know.
And did you see anybody in the misty white room?
I did.
What
Finally,
did you see?
after I got brave enough to look, with Barbara's coaxing, she was like, you can look, it's okay. I saw to my left a row of beings that were all the same. They were white, they were tall and thin, they had white robes on, and they had a high collar, and their arms were all down, and they had very skinny long arms, and some kind of an emblem at the chest area, like a pendant or something on their robes.
Mhm.
And they had the big black eyes and the big heads. And
So they were similar to the gray on Whitley's cover, would you say, or
they were similar enough, except that they were white and glowing white.
glowing white?
Yes, like an indefinable form white.
And how big? How tall? Or
It's hard for me to say how tall because I was looking sideways, and they were all together and they were thin. But I said they were tall.
Three-dimensional, or I mean, did they have substance to them?
They didn't have very much substance in them. They were very glowy. They had enough substance where I could make out the white robes and the high collar and the big black eyes. But other than that, they were kind of like, I don't want to say light beings, but not extremely in solid form in my perception. So I was very afraid. And Barbara asked me, she said, well, ask them what they want. And I said, I have a baby and they want it. And then my knees went apart and I was really screaming because nobody was touching them. It was like mind control. My knees were just spreading. I was like, what? You know, and she said, go up above and watch it. So I went up above and I saw this flash image of a scary looking like gynecological thing. And then the next thing I know, there's a being with this thing with a little embryo, fetus looking little creature inside. That's very tiny. And the being walked out of the room with it. And I was just hysterical. I was just like, I didn't even get to see it. I was just weeping and weeping and feeling very bereft.
Well, now, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being impossible that it would have been your imagination or anything else, how would you rate the credibility of what you're telling me?
I would rate it as a 10.
As a 10.
And the reason, but with qualifications.
Okay.
I believe it really happened. I believe it was emotionally impacting. I don't know at what reality level it happened. In other words, I don't know if these were solid beings on a ship. I don't know if it was an underground base. I don't know if it was an astral thing. But I know that my body back on Earth had no period, had all the signs of pregnancy, and then in January, after this happened, I had a period and everything was fine again. So it matched what was happening with my body. And when I tried to analyze it, like, okay, could this be a screen memory for some sexual abuse or abortion? Or I didn't have anything in my life that correlated to that, in other words. You know, like, I never had an abortion, so that didn't make sense. I had mild sexual abuse as a child, but nothing that bad. And so it was like all the rational things that I could think of. It just seemed like it had to be what it was, as crazy as it sounded. And it was so emotional. I mean, I have never, ever in my life had the kind of emotion that I had that day. Never. I mean, you know, even having my own child years later, if you would hear the tape, the teeth chattering terror. I mean, when I brought the tape home and played it for my boyfriend, he had to like leave the room. He couldn't listen to it. And all that emotion being that real has to be from something real, I think. I mean, that's what I think. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think.
You don't think it's possible that the hypnotist could have led you into believing this or added more to your story?
No, because I listened to the tape a million times and I tried to see if she was feeding me, you know, things, and she wasn't. And she would say, you know, if I say, I see a row of beings and I describe them, and then if she says, you know, and then I'm just crying for 5 minutes, and she's trying to move forward, and she says, well, ask them what they want, and I ask them what they want. I mean, that's not leading me. That's like getting through, because otherwise I'd just laid on her couch and screamed hysterically the whole time. I mean, she was trying to move me through memory.
Now you saw this happening in your mind's eye. Did you feel any pain, actual pain of the experience?
No, it was more just fear. The fear is so overwhelming because it's so foreign to your reality that it just breaks your whole mind down to remember it. It's so disturbing to your whole paradigm to be not only in the presence of those beings, but to be physically constrained like that. I think what's so terrifying isn't the beings, it's the fact that you're paralyzed. I think that's what's more scary. And then when my knees went apart and no one was touching them. So it's the idea that you have no control That's more scary than actually seeing the beings.
So after this initial hypnotic experience, this viewing of the experience, how did you attempt to verify it? Did you go out and try to verify it, or how did it affect your life?
There was no way I could verify. The only thing I had going for me was the fact that I had the missing periods that returned to normal afterward. And not only did I have the missing periods, but I had the traditional symptoms of pregnancy with the sore breast, the nausea, the heartburn, the hysterics, all that.
So
and
you
later
think
when
that
I
you
was
actually
pregnant with
gave-
my kid,
You believe that you actually gave birth to some sort of
yes,
ultra-terrestrial baby or
I think,
hybrid? Or...
I do. I think that I was pregnant for 3 months or so, and then they took it out.
But you don't remember any experience where you...
Was impregnated?
Yeah,
No.
pregnant, that's what I was looking for.
I don't remember that. I've never targeted that. I don't remember it. All my memories have come from hypnosis. I have had physical evidence in the form of marks on my body. My dentist found something in my tooth. That was another whole incident. I've had strange things happen on my body that correlate, but I have no conscious memory of the aliens. The only thing I remember is the sleep paralysis. The next time it happened was in the summer, and then my boyfriend was out of town, so I was sleeping alone every night, and I woke up 3 mornings in a row, and the alarm clock said 4:00, and I was like, okay, why am I waking up at 4:00? I didn't hear anything. I don't have the alarm on. Why? And I got real suspicious. This happened 3 nights in a row. And then they're coming back from the neighbors. Then on the third morning, I was meeting my friend at the beach, so I got in the tub to shave, and I looked down at my calf, and I had this triangular puncture wound that was still crusty, like scabbed over on my calf, and I went, that's an alien thing. I just knew it. I just knew it. And I went and flipped through some books and watched some videos that I had been collecting by now. And I found it, and since then I've met like 4 or 5 other people who've had that. So that's a common thing.
Now, can you describe what this baby looked like?
No, it was inside of a device, like I don't want to call it an egg beater, but it kind of had metal slats like an egg beater, kind of a shape. And whatever it was in there, and it was very small, it was pink. And so whatever it was tiny, and not, easy to make out.
Now, I understand that you took off on a journey to England.
I did.
And
So-
this had to do with the crop circles?
Yeah,
Did you feel that was pulling you to go over there?
Well, it was. I had these experiences. I had another regression later with Yvonne Smith when we targeted the triangle thing, and I got an alien thing again. And then I had a very profound experience with Barbara, targeting. I had started to say things like, oh, humans, oh, earthlings, and I noticed my language was getting really weird, and I went to Barbara and I said, it seems like I miss some non-human beings, but I don't know who they are, and I don't know why I'm talking like this. So I said, can I target that? And she said, yeah, let's try it. So we targeted that, and I had this amazing out-of-body experience where I remembered being a light being, and I was crying and, meeting with these light beings and saying, they're my family, and it was just very, very ecstatic. Like the total opposite of the alien thing. It was like super emotional ecstasy, weeping, like a religious ecstasy. And so between these two experiences, these two extreme experiences I had, in the meantime, I had become interested in the crop circles and was compelled to go to England. I'd always had a thing about England anyway as a kid. So I went to England by myself. I did hook up with Barbara, and I spent one night with her, and she took me to my first crop circle. And it was really cool because one of the small little synchronicities that happened is I'm a big fan of Sting, the musician. And one of my goals when I was in England was to see his house, and he lives in crop circle country. He lives in Wiltshire. So I went to his house, and I saw him in the driveway, and it was like a big deal. So when I hooked up with Barbara, and she said, well, we're going to go see this brand new crop circle. It just happened last night. And we got to it, and we walked around in it, and I was so excited to be in it. And then we found out later that they had given it a name, because when they look like certain shapes, they give them names. And this one was called the Stingray. And I was like, what are the odds? It's for me. It had to be for me.
That's right, yeah.
So that was fun.
Well, synchronicity plays an awful big part of this whole phenomenon.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that I have a whole list synchronicities that could not be coincidence. I mean, just things that are just so incredible that they could not have possibly been just by chance. Myself, I think that there's somebody kind of controlling this or what happens down on planet Earth, and the synchronicity is part of the way of showing this to us.
Seems like it. Oh.
What do we have?
We have a prop. Here's a picture of me and Sting.
Oh.
Yeah, I've met Sting 3 times now.
Uh-huh.
And he's been very nice to me. And he's really into UFOs. And
Well, what did he tell you
this was
about
in Paris. Well, I like this?
Stick it, yeah, that's good. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Jeff took me to Paris to see him in an opera that was written for him. It was awesome. Look at Elvis Costello. And I asked him, I said, Sting, have you ever seen a UFO? And I knew he had because I'd read it in a book. I just wanted to see how he'd react. And he said, yes. And he lit up like, no one ever asked me that. That's a great question. And I said, well, I'd really like to interview you for UFO magazine, because at the time, I had this secret fantasy that I would interview Sting about UFOs for UFO magazine. And that got me my job with UFO magazine.
I did a book called UFOs Among the Stars. I interviewed David Bowie. In fact, David Bowie mentions me in his biography that came out a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, cool! I have a book like that. I don't know if it's yours, but I have another rock and roll.
Oh, well, that was probably Michael Luckman's.
I don't know which one it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a fascinating theory. I mean, so many artists have had this otherworldly influence. You know.
Of course, musicians in particular are open to vibrations and channeling and using their imagination and thought process and stuff that a lot of people wouldn't have to do in their occupation.
Right, they have more freedom to explore.
So, what did you feel about the crop circles? Did you feel that they were legitimate, or?
Well, I mean, I'm not a real big feeler. Like, I don't have a lot of abilities to discern stuff. You know, I don't claim to be like a psychic or intuitive or anything. I do have a knack for meeting other abductees. Like, I can go to a party, and I will find the other abductee in the room. Like, I'll just find him. It's just wild. But when I was in the crop circles, I felt very amazed, and I felt very happy. I don't know if the ones I was in were real or fake. You know, I didn't really look into that too much, like which ones were hoaxes and which ones were legitimate. That year, that was 1998, when I was there. I was crying every day with joy. I just loved that whole area. So I was very emotional anyway. I had a love affair with a guy there. I ended up coming back, and my boyfriend and I that had moved to LA together broke up. So it was a big emotional deal anyway. So I don't want to assign all that to the crop circles themselves, but they were a catalyst. I mean, my life totally changed when I came back from that trip. And I met my husband like a week later at a gas station. We were both getting gas. It was very synchronistic. So it was a great trip.
Did you have any more reduction experiences after you came back? Did that trigger anything?
You know, I had gone in 1997. I had gone to a couple of different healers that worked on me to make it stop, because I'd come to a place where I was still really curious, but I also wanted to move on, and I didn't want it to happen anymore. I didn't want to be afraid to go to bed at night, and so whatever they did, these different healers I went to, I think it worked. However, I had no more obvious abductions. I had no more of the sleep paralysis, marks on my body, all that type stuff for a long time. But I did have a couple of things happen since then. I'd say over the last 10 years. I've had maybe 2 weird things happen. And then recently I was at the the International UFO Congress, and there were some guys there that had a scanning booth where they put you through all these different tests with machines to scan you for implants and stuff. I tell you what, I had like all the machines going off almost. So they were very convinced stuff was still happening to me, and they called me a frequent flyer. And I said, really? You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't remember anything. So if they're coming and getting me and doing anything now, it's very stealth, and it's all, you know, being done in some fashion that I'm not remembering.
Well, do you have any idea what their plans are for the human race? I mean, was any of that ever brought out, or anything that you feel is good, bad, or indifferent?
My memories of it all was very medical and very, you know, on the table, terrified lab rat, or as I call it, dog at the vet. You know, I don't know anything. I'm just here, and they're doing stuff to me. It's scary. And I never had
Well,
these big dialogues.
We've heard the stories from other abductees, female abductees, who tell the same story about being impregnated and giving birth to a hybrid or something along that line. What does that mean? I mean, why are they doing this? Do you have
Well,
any
all I
idea,
know, now I've had, okay, all I know is what I've read, and all I know is what people have either told me, because they're psychics or whatever, or I did recently have kind of a healing session with a lady who claimed to be working with aliens and able to bring me together with my hybrid children. And it's kind of like a meditation thing that we did over the phone. And in that experience, I met 2 of my hybrid children, but I didn't really trust it. Like, I have big trust issues. Anytime anyone tells me something like, oh, you have this energy, or you have that, or I think you're working with these guys or these guys, there's the journalist in me just goes, interesting, and files it away. And I don't really latch on to any ideas and decide on which ones I believe. I'm very confused.
But I mean, you have no inkling as to what all this, I mean, like the ultimate outcome will be, not just necessarily with you, but...
Right. Well, again, all I would say is what I've read. And what I've read from various sources are a couple of different ideas. One idea is that there are beings that have come here from another time, because there's that time-space thing they're able to manipulate, and they need our genetics to improve theirs. So they're breeding with us in order to strengthen their race. Okay, so that's one theory. Another theory is that they are breeding with us to put us off planet, to have some human DNA off planet, because we are in danger of destroying ourselves, and they're preserving our DNA somewhere safe, off planet, on ships. So either one of those theories is logical, but I don't know how I'm involved with that. In other words, I don't know if what happened to me was a good thing that I should be proud of being part of, or was a deceptive thing that was purely for their interest and was, something I shouldn't have been a part of.
Do you think that they're going to be coming back? I mean, do you feel that you experience the end of this, or will it be something else?
No, I don't. I have that kind of anxious feeling that there are things that I know that may be triggered in the future by either events or time that may call me to action in some way. In other words, I feel like I've been prepared for something that I don't know what it is, but when the time comes, I'll know. I have that underlying kind of feeling.
So where do you want to take this? I mean, do you want other people to know? I mean, are you looking to share this experience?
Yeah, my goal, I'm very comfortable talking publicly about it. I've done MUFON meetings, some TV, radio shows and such. I'm writing a book. I put off writing the book because I thought, I have to have this all figured out before I write the book. And then the years keep ticking by, and I'm like, I may never figure this out. Who am I kidding? This is the biggest mystery of our time. Why do I think it's going to happen? We're going to figure it all out. So I just thought, well, I better write the book before I forget everything. And just say at the end of the book, I really don't understand what this was. Here is what happened to me that I remember. Here's my physical evidence. Here are all the different healers and teachers that came into my life that gave me different ideas about it. And, this is where I am now. And I'll just stick this book on your shelf with all the others. And maybe one day we'll figure it out. So I'm not claiming to have any final answers.
Now, I don't know exactly how many minutes we have left here, but did your husband want to add something to this?
I would love it, honey. Jeff, can you hear us? We would love it if you would chime in something about what you've discovered about the astrology of UFO events, just a little quickie version, or the astrology of my UFO event even.
I'm not really feeling
You're not up to it?
I'm
Next
really
time.
not,
Okay.
But I could, but I'd rather, see, I don't have those notes in front of me right now.
He doesn't want to
I
wing
had
it.
a long day. I'd hate to make a comment and not have my
Okay.
notes,
But Jeff, I'll just say that
Yeah.
I made Jeff, and he did do a talk for MUFON here. I made him look at this. I said, look, Jeff, let's pick some UFO events that are very famous, like Willie Strieber's abduction, Travis Walton, Snippy the horse, first cattle mutilation, Just some biggies, flyovers where they shut down the nuclear installations, different thing, like a variety. And I said, please look at these, the ones that we can get really good dates and times, and see if there's anything that's recurring astrologically. And he found some stuff that's recurring astrologically. So it's a very interesting area of research, like what are the conditions, either astronomically or astrologically, that seem to precipitate these events.
Now, do you have any inclination or feelings as to where these beings might come from? You mentioned before time travelers.
I think there's so many things. I mean, they could be crypto-terrestrials. They could be living here all this time in secret on the planet. They could be other dimensional beings. They could be time travelers. They could be actual aliens from other planets and other star systems. They could be a mixture of those things. I don't think there's one type of being visiting humans, and I don't think there's one answer. I think all of the above is probably going on.
And have you ever had the feeling that you've been watched or somebody's keeping tabs on you because of this?
I do feel like I am protected. I'm not a fearful person. I'm fearful of things like planetary changes, Earth changes, but I'm not afraid of
2012?
People.
Is that
Yeah,
gonna affect us?
I get nervous about stuff like that a little bit, and it's not so much that all the stuff is lining up and all the hype, but it's that not only is there all this negative, fearful thought about it, and that can create something, but then you have people worried about it, and they may be like, we see a lot of crazy people doing stuff in the news lately that's very drastic and self-destructive, and you start to wonder, wow, as we get closer to that date, are there going to be more people just losing it and giving up and doing crazy things, especially with the economy so bad and everything. So I kind of worry more about a combination of people going crazy, as well as say an asteroid or whatever. I don't know. I've always had dreams of tidal waves, tornadoes, volcanoes. So I have fears of Earth changes, but every time I get afraid...
Planet X, is it coming?
Yeah, I don't know. But every time I get really afraid, I remember those light beings that I felt at home with. And I just go, wow, if I die and I get to go back to that, then bring it on, whatever it is. I mean, if we're not trapped in the body and we get out and we go back to that kind of ecstasy, then that's not so bad. And I always remember, I chose to be born at this time and ride this roller coaster. And just to be brave, I've had a really great life. I mean, that was kind of a bump in the road, the whole abduction thing. It was like, whoa, what the heck? But I've had a really great life.
Would you be fearful of another experience, or?
Yes. Especially because none of my experiences have been conscious. There's a control factor when you can go and pay someone and sit in a chair and purposefully look at it with guidance and know that it's a memory. That's a whole other thing than having something happen to you in real time that you're wide awake experiencing. That's a mind blower like that.
So now, you mentioned just a few minutes ago that you had contacted other abductees or run into other abductees.
Yeah.
Who have you met that we might have heard of, and whose stories do you believe?
Well, I've met a lot of abductees from when I lived in LA. I was in a couple of different forums where we would talk amongst ourselves. And also, when I wrote for UFO Magazine for 5 years, I was covering the MUFON meetings.
What were the articles that you wrote for them?
I wrote all the MUFON synopsis,
So this was
summaries.
with Vicki and Don.
Right, Vicki and Don.
Yeah, I've been on Don's radio show a few times lately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wrote a couple of other things, like a theater review about a play about alien abduction that was in LA. And I wrote there was a guy who had a theory about Atlantis. I just joined that. But mostly, I was doing summaries of the MUFON meetings. And it was great, because I got to spend more time with all the speakers, getting their visuals.
You have met
and stuff.
like Travis Walton?
Yeah. I've met Travis. Well, I met Travis at this recent. I met him in LA, and then I met him again recently. In February at the International UFO Congress. And I really like Travis. And I asked him. I said, "So Travis, have you ever had any more experiences?" And he said, "Well, if I was, I wouldn't tell anyone." I said, "I don't blame you, buddy. You've been through enough. If that's going on with you and you want to keep quiet, then fine."
How about the reptilians, underground bases? Mean anything to you?
Yeah, I'm really into David Icke. Okay, the first time I saw David Icke, this is wild. I didn't know who he was, and I was volunteering at the Whole Life Expo in LA. It's like 1996 or 7. And he came up the steps, and he went to check in at the speaker table, and he had this aura. I swear the man had this, and I don't see auras, so I shouldn't use that word. It's not like I saw an aura. It's that when he came up the steps, I could feel his energy spread out like 40 feet in all directions. It was like he had an invisible army of angels with him.
You sure they're angels?
No?
Oh.
That's what it felt like. It felt very
Yeah.
good and very powerful. And when he checked in, I ran over to the table when he left, and I said, "Who is that guy?" And they told me, and I volunteered to be in his room. And I was really blown away. This is when he had written "And the Truth Shall Set You Free." So whatever time frame that was. And I've been a fan of him ever since. And I have met a few people who've said they've seen people shapeshift. Pamela Stonebrook was one of my friends in Los
I know who
Angeles.
she is, yes.
And some other people who have described seeing that. So there's something going on with that. I don't know if these reptilians are aliens, if they're demonic, if they're, again, you get that whole soup of, what are these beings really? And what's all the crossover, and it's confusing. So, but I think he's a good person. I think he's doing a good thing. I don't think he gets everything 100% right, but I think he's onto a lot of interesting things that we should be taking note of.
How about any of the other abductees?
I recently met Stan Romanek and Lisa,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
I love them. I just really hit it off with them at the Congress, and I really believe his story. I have all of his books, and I saw his talk, and I feel like that's some serious stuff going on. And he has a whole group of witnesses. I mean, he has enough people around that have seen stuff when they're with him. It's very well documented. His case is amazing. Again, just because someone has an amazing case doesn't mean they're right about everything the beings are saying to
of
them.
course not.
And the beings could be very deceptive or truthful. We don't
Well,
know. So that's the whole question.
this is what I found out in my research. First of all, anything that they tell you about some futuristic event probably is not going to come true, especially in the day and time that they
Right.
say
Dates and times.
that it will. I mean, I know many cases where people have gone to, a supposed area where there are going to be UFO landing and they're supposed to meet space people and
Right,
stuff like that.
right.
And
Never happens.
they got hit by a mini tornado or something instead, In fact, we went to a place in Wyoming one time where we were told there was supposed to be, well, there had been UFO sightings there apparently, and we're out in the middle of like 1 o'clock in the morning, and it turns out we're in the middle of a cow pasture surrounded by very excitable bulls.
Oh God.
So, and it was me and maybe about 7 or 8 other people, mainly elderly ladies who had come to a local UFO conference. So we barely got out of there without being crushed by a 2,000-pound bull. So,
Now Stuart Wilde, you know Stuart Wilde?
I know who he
Okay,
is. Yes.
he's a mystic, and he is kind of anti-UFO.
Mhm.
He says all UFOs that you see that are metallic anyway, that are ships, are demons that are shape-shifting and using these ships. He says that's why, in the 1800s people saw airships, and now we see these very high. He said so they just mimic what humanity is able to do.
Yeah, but that doesn't make him demonic necessarily. Also, when I talk about demons, I try to tell people I'm not really speaking about the Christian fundamentalist
Right.
point of view as to what a demon is, but more of like what Aleister Crowley would do. There are all kinds of spirits that you can conjure up,
Right.
some of whom may do your bidding, and some of whom would like to destroy you and everything
Right,
around
trick you, right,
Yeah,
use you,
right. So, I
Yeah.
don't know. They're here, and there's not much we can really do about it, as far as I know. But
Yeah.
that's probably a good reason that the government will never disclose anything, because first of all, they probably are not in a position to
To do
prove
anything.
most of this either.
or do anything about it. And
or
that's a
do anything
powerless
about it, yeah.
stance, so they don't want to claim a powerless stance. Now, one of the theories that I find interesting is this set of books called The Ringing Cedars of Russia has really had a
Oh, I haven't
profound
heard of
effect
that
on
one.
me. It's out of Russia, and it's a series of books about this woman who's a mystic who lives in Siberia, and she says that
She lives in Siberia.
yes,
Unfortunate her.
Well, she loves it.
Yeah,
She loves it.
Yeah.
She's at one
I
with
have the
nature.
book.
Well, they're on the shelf,
I'll go
but
to you.
the Ringing Cedars of Russia, you can go to ringingcedars.com and get them. They're amazing. The first one's called Anastasia, and then there are 8 other books. And she says that the aliens are what the opposite of God. She doesn't use the term Satan, but she said that which is not what created humans tried to create a human and never could get it right. And the aliens are that. They're like not, they don't have souls like we do. They're not divine. She says this is our planet. And she said we have to be very wary of aliens coming again and offering technology. Because the more enslaved we become to technology, it weakens our souls. And she's very
Well,
pro-nature
I
and
think now,
anti-technology.
if there was a UFO crash at Roswell, I don't necessarily think that it was extraterrestrial, but let's say, for example, if it was, that they could have absolutely left behind, like this technology we have today, which later developed into a computer,
Right.
computer age, because now they can control us without even having to be here. They know everything about us. They know everything about every subject that affects us. They can look at what's happening on Facebook.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like
Spilling our guts on Facebook, yeah.
it's kind of a a Trojan horse.
Oh, I like that idea. So, here's one, Anastasia.
Mhm.
Yeah, these books are amazing. And she is anti-alien, but very pro-God and pro-human. And she has a lot of abilities, this woman. And she says she gets them from just living in nature in pristine conditions. And she is at one with the animals. She can bilocate. She can do all these amazing things. And I highly recommend that series of books.
Well, I think we're probably just about at the end here of the
Oh,
interview.
you have some time.
Yeah, how much time do we have?
10 minutes.
Oh, okay, well, that's a little bit, and in our space and time, that's a little bit of time. What do you plan to do next as far as the finding out anymore? Are you going to go into hypnosis at all, or?
I've kind of explored hypnosis. It's not that I don't need to do it again or want to do it again. I am
Do you think
interested.
that these beings want you to know what happened, or it doesn't matter to them?
I don't really know. Sometimes I think there are forces that don't want me to know, but I don't know if that's a bad thing. It may be a protective thing. Like maybe the more I know, the more it would make me upset and not functional. Maybe it is better to just know a little bit. I always tell people when they come to me and they say, I think this happened to me. I say, well, you may want to think about it before you go and get hypnotized and prove it to yourself, because once you open that can of worms, you're done. I mean, it takes over your life. You can't go back. Once you know what happened to you, it's a big deal in your life. And part of me, I kind of pull in and out of the subject. Sometimes I get really into it and I go to a lot of meetings, and then sometimes I pull back and I go, oh, I've had enough, we're just going in circles. And so to me, what's most interesting research-wise is what are these beings? What's the agenda? I tend to believe, like Jacques Vallée, that it's a long-term psyops thing going on with shape-shifting and manipulation, at least with one faction. Again, you get into this, well, some people have these bad experiences, some people have these wonderful experiences, and there's everything in between. And but it definitely seems to be a long-term project with beings that can change form over time, or at least we're describing them differently over time. But it seems, from reading the very ancient UFO accounts, we're not seeing things like that now. So why do they look different now? And then sometimes why do they look the same as they did back then? And I think that's because our minds have certain catalogs of reference, and they pull from that. And as our catalog grows, they pull from that. Pull from that. Pull from that.
Do you feel that they're going to have more of an impact in the future, or is it all going to keep pretty much
No, I
level?
think something's escalating. I think people are waking up, and that's got to be in effect. I think that it's got to build to something. I mean, we have enough problems on the planet where either there's the potential for them to step in and help us, or watch us all destroy ourselves, or maybe we'll wake up and clue up, and fix it ourselves. Because I also don't trust that whole savior thing. Like, oh, the aliens are going to save us. I'm like, if they're not
no.
going to save us, they could have done that already.
Yeah,
they haven't
they
done
would.
it yet. So
But
why
also
are we
too,
gonna
if they
do
wanted
it?
to, play Alien Invader, they could
They could have done
they could
that
have too. And what would be the purpose of that? I mean, zap, zap.
Right.
I mean,
right.
that doesn't make too much sense either. I mean, to my way of thinking, it's like your next door neighbor is there, and maybe he's friends with you, maybe he isn't, and maybe he couldn't care less. And I kind of think that's maybe what's going on here, is they could be our next door neighbor,
Yeah.
and they either can't go over the fence, or don't want to bother going over the fence, or maybe they just
Yeah, but then there's also, there has been a lot of talk, allegedly, that the aliens tell people, we don't like you to use nuclear, you're going to screw yourselves
well,
with
that
nuclear,
could also
stop
be because
nuclear.
they don't want us to be in a position of doing anything to defend ourselves either. I mean,
But
you
it
can't, you
could
can't
be
say
because- but
if
who
they're
knows?
maniacal and
Yeah.
hypocritical.
But
and,
I think that when we do these explosions, I think it reverberates on other dimensions,
well,
and it affects them.
it may well do that, yes.
And they don't want us shaking their boat either.
Yeah,
Something
maybe
like
maybe
that.
at some point we might need to find a way to defend ourselves. Although that doesn't seem very likely either. Not with the present, whoever the present projection or intelligence. That doesn't seem to be the case. Or if we had to defend ourselves in that way, we would have had an opportunity a long time ago. But there have been
Yeah.
cases, of course, where people have been, animals have been mutilated,
Right.
and supposedly
People.
people as well. But those stories are kind of hard to prove. Of course, in South America,
Right.
a few years ago, there were cases where people were burned very badly. I mean, but if you get too close to an airplane or a jet taking off, you're
You
going to
get
get
burned,
burned. And so
Yeah,
forth.
I don't know. I kind of lean toward the idea that there are different beings with different agendas, and there are some really dark beings that feed off of our negative energy, like the reptilian image of, they want humans to stay alive
Are they in
and
touch?
keep
Are they in touch with
making
each
babies, but they're pulling energy off of our negativity. And I think that there are nice, benefic beings trying to help us progress and mature in our consciousness. And I think there are beings that just need our genetics for whatever reason.
Now, can you pick and choose who you want to contact, or block out those like you would somebody on a cell
Well, that's
phone?
a very important question. And, I've worked with people who have said, I made agreements to work with these negative beings, but I'm also working with positive beings. That you can, as a soul, agree to be part of the drama. It's like jumping into a play and going, are you going to play the bad guy or the good guy?
And some people have no connectivity to this whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, they just go about life and they think that we're
Yep.
all,
Crazy.
like Bugs Bunny or something like that.
And it's so hard to talk to people who aren't involved
Mhm.
about it. That's why I tend to surround myself with like-minded people. Because, when I make new friends, I usually put this out on the table really early. And I've been criticized for that. But it's such a big part of my life that
Yeah, well,
I just want to
keep
get it
your
over
secret,
with.
yeah.
It's like, this is my
Good
thing.
thing
If
you're
you
not a
can't handle
funda-
this,
Good
then...
thing you're not a fundamentalist, but that's,
Well, it's funny, my boyfriend Eric, when this first happened to me and I was talking about it all the time, he was mortified because he thought, wow, this is so hard to deal with. And then she's talking about it, like at parties.
Mhm.
And he said, I can't handle this. It's like you're a born-again Christian, but worse. That's how he described it. And, my mother had a strong reaction when I first told her. She didn't know what to say. I mean, it's not the normal thing your kid calls you up and tells you. Her reaction was, why can't you be gay like your brother? I know how to do gay. I don't know how to do aliens. This is too weird.
Well, there are some people, like yourself, who seem to have the experience, and maybe, it's had some effect on their life, but they seem to continue on in a rational way. Yet there are other people that we know and who have come in contact with who you wouldn't want to associate with because they've just gone out on a limb, about this. They've just taken too much, of this to heart and have let it consume their entire
Right.
existence.
I really try to balance it. I really try to keep it on the back burner.
Are you still involved in acting now?
I'm acting a little bit. My husband has a production company, and I'm doing a little acting. I don't want to act anymore. This really did eclipse my desire to act. It really did take over my life. What I'm happy doing right now is raising my kid, you know, being Jeff's secretary, handling clients. I really enjoy
Got a
that.
nice,
You know,
by
we
the
have
way,
two
film
businesses, right?
film studio going
We
on
have
here.
the film business and the astrology business that we're very busy with both of those. And I'm happy doing that. I have a kid, you know, I have a dog and some fish and birds and a garden and a
And an
husband.
alien or two in the closet.
And I have enough going on. I really, you know, only go into this world once in a while just to kind of see what's new. And I really enjoyed the International UFO Congress, though. That was a blast. And so I'm ready to write the book, finish the book. I mean, I wouldn't mind doing publicity for the book because I think that would be fun.
Well, yeah,
But
I think, in fact,
I don't
Kevin
want this to
Smith,
take over my
Kevin
life.
Smith
you know.
called me again today.
Yeah.
We seem to be running around in circles. And usually when I do his show, since it's 2 hours, you know, he said, Kevin, I want to bring on, you know, like somebody with me. Because I've told my experiences, which have gotten long, you know, I mean, they're pretty long and lengthy, but how many times can you tell them? So I like, and you have an interesting story, and it's experience, and it's certainly more believable than most, and you present it in a sane and rational and way, and you know, you got the personality to bring it across to people. And what would you say to people who want to get involved in this, who have either had an experience or haven't had an experience? What should they do so that they can keep well balanced?
Well, I think you have to realize that whatever this is, it's got to be compartmentalized somewhat because it is a rabbit hole. And if you go looking for the big answer and you don't find it right away, it can really take over. And, you know, because I thought I'd figure this out like in a couple of years. I was like, I'm going to figure this out in a couple of years and I'll have it all figured out. And I was so naive.
Well, I think
So
a lot.
you have to
A
understand
lot,
you
a
may
lot,
never
a lot
figure
of
it
people
out.
get into this. Well, I see we're about to come to a conclusion here. How do people get people can contact you on Facebook?
People
Are you on
can
Facebook?
contact me on Camille James Harmon on Facebook. And yeah, I mean, I'm you know, out there and available to email people. I'm not afraid of talking to people.
Good, good. I'm sure a lot of people maybe will share some of their experiences with you, and then you can pass them on to us.
Yeah.
I want to thank you. It's been a
welcome.
pleasure, and I wish you well with this, and have a good evening.